This is cool, going up on a stage and not having to pick something up and put it down again. Cool. So welcome, everybody. My name is Nick Doelman. I'm here with my good friend, Lisa Crosbie. So, Lisa, we met in person 2018, 2019, somewhere in there in Australia. And I remember I had a session, and it was a 365 Saturday on Power Pages, or at that time, Power Apps Portals, or whatever it was called then. And I met you, and you had a session at the same time as me.
You were a big deal. I feel like I met you before you met me, because you were the headline act of a local conference where I live, and I had 15 people in one room, and you had standing room only off to the side.
Yeah, and then now here we are years later, and if I look at my YouTube numbers, and I'm happy if I get 100 views on something.
I'm not happy if I get 100 views on something.
Yeah, so roles have reversed a little bit, but I think we're here today. We're going to talk about, our journey in the community and how it's kind of unleashed our own productivity and how it's sort of helped our careers and the projects we've worked on and anything like that. So I know going back to those, the time we met in Australia, or probably a little bit before that, how did you get involved in the community?
That was very early for me. I actually did a career change in 2016. That event where we met in 2018, I was only 2 years in. I didn't really know anyone in the community. Of the 15 people that were in my session, 3 of them were the sort of partner that I'd been working with at the time. I first got involved around that time by commenting on a LinkedIn post that Chris Huntingford had commented on, that Scott Sewell had written about the Titanic demo of Power BI. And anyone who's been around in the community for a while, this is a bit of a legendary thing that Scott Sewell, who works at Microsoft, had done, using the data from the Titanic to show Power BI. And there were these guys who, Chris Huntingford and Will Dorrington were doing a thing which back in the day was called Those Dynamics Guys, so I sort of knew of them and I'd listened to them. And I replied to one of their comments, and one of them replied to me, and I'm like, oh. And then we got chatting. It was just a very organic thing, and I somehow found myself just sort of part of the conversation and just ran with it.
Into the tribe. Yeah. It's interesting you bring up Scott Sewell, because I remember when I kind of got in the community, beginning to do a few speaking events here and there. Before I became MVP, I didn't really know anybody. I was in I think Tampa Bay or something. There was a UG conference, and there was this contest, and they called it, I think it was put together by a former MVP, Adam Vero. And he put together this contest, and it was called the XRM Factor, kind of like there was the X Factor that was that show. And I remember we went through a whole series to show off some technology, and I think I showed JavaScript snippets that you could use in Dynamics 365, and it was down to me and Scott Sewell in the final round. And he was showing, I think, XRM Toolbox, and somehow, in terms of the audience voting, I won. And at that point, I knew, okay, maybe I actually belong with this crew a little bit. I mean, meeting Scott was really cool. I think that my joy out of that was I beat Gus Gonzalez by quite a bit. So anyways, I remember,
So like a 6 degrees of separation story for all of us with either Scott Sewell or Chris Huntingford.
Yes, absolutely. So that's sort of how I got into the community as well, and started kind of, blogging and that kind of thing. And I found blogging was really, I started writing blogs to help me remember stuff, because I was learning stuff. There wasn't a lot at that time on portals specifically. And then it sort of began to pick up a little bit of steam. And then I sort of, got people reaching out, asking questions. And it kind of felt good to kind of give back to the community. How did you feel as you begin to move through the community?
Yeah, I think that thing of, it's such a cliche, but that you get more back than you put in. There's always that thing where you are creating content, and I think we all start on that journey of you do the thing you can't help but do. And for me, that was I started speaking at events and user groups. I love the idea of being a blogger, but when I sit down to write, it doesn't happen. So for me, it was speaking. And then you have that moment of someone comes up and says, I learned something from you, or that helped me, or that was really interesting. And then that little spark back of, I did something I couldn't help doing, but I helped someone else, is kind of, you get more back from it than you put into it, always.
Yeah, and I find too, a lot of times I'll get a question about Power Pages on LinkedIn, or even about the Power Platform in general, and someone will ask me a question, and what I like sometimes, if I can answer the question with a blog post I've written.
That's nice.
Or sometimes it's even better, it's hey, your question got me thinking, I'm going to figure it out, and then that gives me inspiration to write a blog post, and then you find out that that one thing that's solved for that one person solved it for like 30 other people. And it's sort of nice because sometimes, like, as everybody does, if you run into a problem, I guess nowadays everybody asks Copilot to help them out.
And that's always accurate.
100% accurate. But you Google or something and you find that answer you're looking for, and that's that nugget where you dig down, you find that random blog post by someone that saved the day for you in your project or what you're working on or that customer problem or that support issue. And then what's really cool about our community is sometimes years later, you run into that person. Like, thank you for that blog post. It saved the day for me. And I've had that come back to me as well. Like someone said, we had a support ticket open with Microsoft and for weeks and we couldn't solve it. Then we found your blog and it solved it right away. Like, And
if we want to talk about productivity.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what being involved in the community is all about. I mean, a lot of people, this for them is their job, their career, they like it. They'll go in, they'll do the work, they might Google, they might read some content, and they'll do it. And then at the end of the day, they shut down their laptop and they're good. They move on with their lives, and that's perfectly okay. For me, though, just at the end of the day, it's sort of like, okay, I've done my regular work. Now I can do a video or I can, put something together, some content, because it turns into a bit of a hobby with all of this, in a sense. Maybe
it's not sad at all.
Not at all.
We spend our spare time doing this.
Right.
Not sad at all.
No. But I think for me, just being a part of that community as well, it's opened a lot of doors for my career. Have you found the same?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's helped me find my path, I guess. Like, it's opened doors to opportunities to come and be part of conferences. It's certainly helped me as someone who came from a different career to figure out my place in this technology, I suppose. That when I started out thinking, I'm not technical enough, I'll go to a user group and people are doing very highly technical things I don't understand, but actually if I do my thing, then there's value in that, and then figuring out what that looks like for me. And I ended up kind of creating this job that I have out of just doing that and following that path, for sure.
Right. So I'm very curious, Lisa, like, I like doing blogs. I've only started in the last year or two doing a lot of videos in conjunction with my blog. Of course, I do the podcast as well, and you've had your own podcast before. But tell us about the YouTube channel, because you exploded on YouTube kind of like out of nowhere. Do you want to talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, that's the lemonade I made out of the lemon of the pandemic. So,
the pandemic. What was that?
I had this ambition to speak, to do conferences, to do user groups, to do all these things, and right at February 2020, I got my first speaking spot at a Microsoft conference in Australia. Tiny room, up on a Friday afternoon in the top floor on an obscure topic, but I stood at the Microsoft podium. This is what I want to be doing. That was February 2020. So by the end of 2020, when I spent the entire year doing virtual user groups and staring down the barrel of a camera and talking to 10 people on mute and pretty much burnt out from that experience, I started to think, if I'm going to talk down the barrel of a camera to seeing nobody, maybe I can reach 1,000 people instead of 10 people. And video, most people are surprised to learn this, video is not my natural skill. This is being comfortable talking to a camera, I promise you, is an entirely learned skill for me. Standing in front of people is something I've always felt comfortable doing. The pandemic forced me. My day job is doing demos and presentations, and suddenly I had no choice but to learn to stare down the eye of a camera and be comfortable with that. So I got to the start of 2021. I'd recorded a couple of things on YouTube, just incidentally, of things that I'd done. And I just thought, what if I tried? And I looked at, there's a guy called Kevin Stratford who used to work at Microsoft, who quit his job at Microsoft and now has like 2 million followers or something. And I watched his videos and went, there's no reason I can't do that. And it wasn't like, I could do that. It's like, the difference is that he's done it and I haven't. And what if I tried? There's nothing he's doing that's beyond my skill set. My big ambitious goal, I think I said on my podcast at the time with Megan, was that I reach 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And I hit 5,000, and then there's just been absolutely no looking back. Just turned into a thing that I love doing and that I've got better at by doing it.
Cool. And but how many subscribers do you have now?
56,000.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's
very cool. Yeah.
the reality of this does give me credibility points with my teenagers. And the idea of my first ambition was, can I hit 2,000 subscribers? Now the idea of the whole like silver play button for 100,000 is possible. I'd never thought that would be on the agenda at all. But then those are big numbers. I still find the one person who comes up and says, at Canadian Power Platform Conference, which is an awesome event that you did, lovely woman comes up to me and says, I'm an immigrant. I don't know if I can tell this story without tearing up. I'm an immigrant. I was out of work for 4 years. I tried learning. I couldn't understand anything. Your content is what gave me the way to get in. And I'm just like, that's pretty real. Like those numbers, I'm not going to lie, that feels pretty nice to go, 56,000 subscribers. But I'm getting chills. It was like this woman's life was changed from something I sat on the other side of the world and did.
Yeah.
That's the real deal.
Yeah, and it is that personal impact you have on people's lives. There's a responsibility about it, I find as well, and I've gotten that too, where someone has said, "Oh, your content has helped me," or "I read your blog, I follow your journey." I've kind of made life decisions based on somebody I don't even know would just sort of do that, and that to me is that's a lot of impact, and I think that's also a lot of the impact of the community that we have as well. That, it is fun to go to conferences and meet our friends and hang out and everything, but we also have that impact, and with great power comes great responsibility as well. Wow.
That's the thing for me. It's like it started out entirely about me, about I need to do something to keep myself sane. And then I hear things like that, and I'm like, oh, my motivation for doing it is layered now. There's more to it than that now.
Yeah. And then, of course, along with that, too, because there's probably people that are wondering, there is like the Microsoft MVP program, and I know some people might not know exactly what that is. And of course, like you're an MVP, I'm an MVP. I'm a new MVP, kind of. Sort
You're
of.
2 times, 5 times. You've been in and out of the program.
Yeah, it's something a Microsoft FD cannot be an MVP. So when I was at Microsoft, I had to give that up. But then I got out of Microsoft and somehow snuck back in the program. I'm not sure who I paid off or whatever. But anyways, but I think for the people in the community that are interested in that is an award. It's not a certification. It's nothing we can write an exam for. It's all about producing community content. And again, I think most of the MVPs that you'll talk to, even the ones that are in the front row here falling asleep for us, they'll all agree that we never did it to get the MVP award. It was something that we kind of did for ourselves, but that's kind of that cyclical. We did it for ourselves, but it did kind of help the community. So it was just one of those things, and it's kind of nice to have. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of us really need it.
The contribution has to be its own reward, is the way that I put this, because honestly, the thing with the MVP award is you have to get it renewed year on year on year on year. You don't just get it once forever. And the amount of work that goes into it, and we do this in our spare time, has to be something that brings you its own reward, that it's satisfying or you feel you're having some impact. If you are doing it purely for that badge, I don't think it's sustainable, to be honest. You might get it once, but it would be unlikely you'd keep going if you didn't. I can't help but do that stuff now.
Yeah, it's totally. Yeah, I agree. It totally. If you want to become an MVP and it's a chore to do the work, it's not for you.
You're not going to go the distance.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, part of that community too. Like for me, I think being a part of the community and getting into this group and things like that, it's opened a lot of doors for me. I'm out of Microsoft again. I'm an independent, and I would say probably 95% of the work I've done as an independent over the last 5 to 6 years has been the result of working through the community and knowing that network through the community. So I think for, when we talk about unleashing productivity throughout the network, there is that kind of help our careers, but even more on a kind of more micro level as well. An example the other day, and this is kind of talking about the reciprocal stuff.
Reciprocity?
Thank you.
Oh, I got that first time. That was risky.
Yeah, my tongue is all in a knot now. But it was interesting because I got the other day, just on WhatsApp, my phone buzzed, and it was our good friend of ours, Dion Taylor. So Dion's in the U.S., and she was sort of like, Nick, I can't get this beeping portal working. Can you help me out?
I like her to swear.
Yeah, she does her language. Anyways, Dion, we love you. I hope you're watching. But she called me up. She said, "Hey, I'm stuck on a portal question." So I was like, "Okay, let's hop on Teams." We hopped on Teams, kind of walked her through it, showed her a few things, and she was already like, it was just kind of an unblocker. All good. And then there was a week or two later, and my wife works in the industry as well. She's a dynamics consultant. She said, "I know you don't know anything about field service, but can you ping one of your friends to answer me a field service question?" So I kind of, "What's that?" Like, "Dion, can you answer a field service question?" Like, "Oh yeah, for sure." And so Dion actually got on a Teams call with my wife and walked her through a bunch of stuff and answered some questions. So again, it's this community. What I like about unleashing your productivity, which we're going back to the theme, if you notice. We have that within the community. If you build that community of a networking of folks, you have that call a friend button.
Oh, it's like the best brains trust in the world. I like to think of it, I don't know if this expression is used here, but a potluck dinner where everyone brings a plate to the table. Anyone right now who tries to tell you that they are across all of the things in this technology stack is kidding themselves or lying to you. There is no way. There's no way you can be across all of it. So the idea of like, well, my thing is that I'm great at kind of bringing beginners on and deconstructing things, and I'm across all the new stuff, and you're across the portals, and Dion's across the, like we've all got our thing. And then that idea of, well, I've brought my expertise to the table and I'm willing to share what I know, and I know that everyone else there is willing to share what they know. And suddenly, yes, you've just got this incredible phone a friend. And I've got countless stories as well like that where I do a lot of pre-sales type works and demos and things, which often means I have to be across a huge breadth of things very quickly. And the phone a friend option is amazing to just go, "Hey, have you talked about this before? Have you done this before? Can you help me out with this?" And I've done the same in return as well. It just makes an absolute, difference. And then down into the deep technical stuff, our friend Megan Walker, who I used to do a podcast with, is like an expert in the customer insights side of things. Her blog is so specifically deep into that tech that if I've got a question about what's going on, rather than spending days figuring it out or hours figuring it out, I've either read her blog and got the answer I needed or ping her a message and get the answer I needed. So it just makes such a difference to, we can talk community, we get right down to it, that value of that content for productivity of just being able to find the answers or phone a friend is amazing.
Yeah, and and I know sometimes we may in the grand scheme of things could be working for competitive partners or whatever, but I think there's as we've been seeing some of the theme too is there's a shortage of workers and stuff. So really, there's really not that issue so much. And then there's also the idea of rising tides lift all boats, so we can help each other out. It's great. I mean, there's countless examples of us getting help from someone else or us helping other people. Coming to things like this, learning from sessions, and then knowing, okay, yeah, I know a guy, or I know a girl, or I don't know somebody. I know somebody that knows something about this. It kind of, and no offense to Microsoft support, but sometimes it beats Microsoft support hands down.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of if you were to go back in time or go visit Lisa mid 2010s or whatever, what would you tell her? What would you say about getting into the community? What would you do differently?
I hesitated for too long before I went and did my first presentation at a user group because I thought I wasn't technical enough and I thought there wasn't value in what I would bring to the table. So I would sit in these user groups and not really understand what was going on. Eliza Benitez, who was someone I worked with at the time, was like, "You've got to present at the user group." And I wanted to do that kind of thing, but it's like, no, I can't do something technical enough. And in the end, when I did something that was very me, a very sort of, hey, here's a relatively new technology, let's talk about what this is and what this means, it was quite a barrier to sort of go, I'm coming from a different career, and that fear of not being technical enough. And once I did it once, and people were very open and very receptive and supportive, as I've found in most of it. So I think that thing of finding your approach or niche and being different from what everyone else does isn't a reason not to do it. In fact, it's a reason to do it.
Right.
And I've got the confidence of that now, but it took me a while to to get to that when I was new to it.
Yeah, and just to you do the thing and
Do the
start.
thing, yep.
And then also, like you said, like your own unique approach and your own voice to it. Like that's what I find is too. If people will ask me, going, well, I'd love to be an MVP or I'd love to write a blog on this, but there's already somebody else who put in a session on Power Automate or whatever. It's like, but everybody brings their own unique voice to the table as well. And yes, you might like. There's this thing called Copilot. Have anybody heard of this? Copilot?
I didn't know where you were going with that.
So perfect. So, but there's a thing, right now we see in a lot of the sessions there are tons of things on Copilot, but everybody is experiencing this differently. This is truly a paradigm shift, but it's just that everybody has their own unique experience, their own project. So everybody can bring, like you said, that potluck. Yeah, someone is going to bring scalloped potatoes, but are they going to bring your scalloped potatoes?
Yeah, right.
It's going to be, so that's what I kind of find too. Like that's part of a lot of things I used to hold back on, like, oh no, there's already a good blog on this particular topic. And eventually I'm like, no, you can, not that you can write a better topic of this, you can write something somewhat different because your experiences are different.
And you're going to reach a different audience with your voice as well, that the way that you express something is going to land better with some people than the way someone else will do it and vice versa. We're not going to be copying what other people are doing, but here's a topic that lots of people want to learn about. Providing different avenues into that has immense value.
Yeah, and that definitely sort of like unleashes again, unleashing the productivity, again, getting these different angles and things like that. So the other thing I kind of did want to touch on a little bit about this community that I think we're all a part of, like we're all here, we're meeting new people, we're networking, is the friendships. Like you live apparently on another planet than the rest of us.
That too, yeah.
But you and I are really good friends.
Yep.
Like we could send a text to each other, whatever. There's other friendships around the world. I mean, every so often I'll get texts from Daniel, like all the time. And these crew, I look at my podcast partner, Ulrika, like her and I are like best friends. We're doing the podcast together. We live an entire ocean apart from each other. So these types of things I found with the community is really cool. When I visited New Zealand 2 years ago, all of a sudden I said, hey, I'm going to be visiting New Zealand. And it's like, oh, then all of a sudden there's like 10 of us at a bar on lunchtime in the middle of the workday. Just to kind of see me, I was there. It was like, that's kind of a little bit weird, but also really cool as well. And it's the same thing. If anybody wants to visit Canada, let me know. Let's go out for a beer or a coffee or something.
Yeah, it's incredible to just land on the other side of the world, and there are people there that I consider friends. That some of them I've only ever met in person once or never. But we all chat and we all kind of know each other so well that. Yeah, that's been an absolutely incredible part of the experience for sure.
Yeah, and it's also not an exclusive club as well. And that's the other cool thing I find, that there's constantly, as new people come into the community, I've just sort of seen it too. Like there's new folks. I think a good example is a guy from Germany, Tino Rabbe. He does the Power Pages newsletter. He kind of came out of nowhere, started posting stuff on LinkedIn and this and that. We didn't know him. I didn't know him. And we were able to reach out to him and say, hey, you're doing a lot of cool stuff. You want to become an MVP? What's an MVP? We kind of walk him through the process. And then now he's, here's somebody, he got his award, I think, 1st of May, now part of the community and just sort of diving in and interacting with people. I was able to meet him in Color Cloud last month. So it's just sort of, again, it's not this, it's not this whole exclusive club in high school kind of thing.
But that's the key to it, is the contribute.
Yeah.
And then the community will kind of find you and bring you in, or you can reach out, which is very, like if you want to get started in this, to just start making your contribution, whatever that is, and it will get noticed, as opposed to randomly reaching out and saying, hey, please nominate me, which is ridiculous. I don't know you, you've done nothing, I'm clever, it's not like that. This is very much about saying, whether it's the MVP award or the community, it's about, I want to bring whatever it is that I want to contribute to this group, and the people who do that, it's very open and very welcome.
Noticed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's another piece of advice. If you want to become an MVP, if you have to ask to be nominated, well, you're not quite ready yet. And it does take time to create that library of content over time and get noticed and things like that. But then once you're there, then probably somebody from Microsoft will be on that. Because having been within Microsoft, they do notice certain people in the community creating content because these program managers want their stuff promoted. Very much like, here at Resco wants their stuff promoted. Like, it's really cool. Like the stuff that they're showing is really cool stuff. And once it sort of gets out there, we want to kind of re-promote it as well.